Previously on agentpalmer.com, the Tragically Hip needs no dress rehearsal to gain new fans. Learning more about Steve Prefontaine is its own runner's high, and Kristen continues to share the editing process online, and that's just one of the reasons you should follow her. This is the Palmer Files, episode 135, featuring the return of Tony Rapino, a man of many hats and talents, who's here because since his last appearance on episode 92, we've become friends, which means I can ask him leading questions about his writing process and blocks, his baking habits, how he stays motivated, is he a recluse, and just how strong is his need to create. Are you ready? Let's do the show! Hello and welcome to the Palmer Files. I'm your host, Jason Stershik, also known as Agent Palmer, and on this 135th episode is the return of Tony Rapino. He first appeared on this show as the author of a book I enjoyed, but he's returning to the show as a friend. You'll hear a little about how odd that is and some things that make it even odder. Plus, we talk about Tony's writing process, where he finds his creative bandwidth, all of the other hats writers have to wear. Plus, we divert into our baking origins, talk about what we enjoy about being in the kitchen, as well as imposter syndrome, being hard on ourselves as creatives, and well, all of that and a whole lot more is coming your way shortly. But first, remember that if you want to discuss this episode as you listen or afterwards, you can find all related ways to contact my friend Tony and myself in the show notes. There you can also find Tony's website, anthonyjrapino.com. That's ANTHONYJRAPINO.com. Plus, you can watch Tony's Retro Days scripts come to life on youtube.com/retrodays. That's RETRODAZE. Don't forget, you can see all of my writings and rantings on agentpalmer.com. And of course, email can be sent to thepalmerfiles@gmail.com. So without further ado, let's get into it. Tony, you first appeared on this show as an author whose book I had read. And now you're returning to the show as a friend whom I text and call on a fairly regular basis.
Yeah, very true.
Is this the weirdest thing you've gotten out of a podcast?
You know what?
Or unexpected, not weird, but most unexpected.
Unexpected, yes. I was going to say, I don't know how to define, and if this is the correct definition of weird in this case, but given our proximity, I think the weird thing is probably that we haven't actually hung out yet.
That's true. I have thought about it, but never with we're close enough that it could happen, but not close enough that it can happen within 5 minutes. Planning needs to happen. And every time I'm like, I should call up Tony. It's like, yeah, but we're starting whatever we're doing in 10 minutes.
Planning needs to happen. And I'm a notorious sort of I don't go out much, and I don't want to call myself a recluse necessarily because I go places,
but every time I talk to you, you're on your way somewhere. So you don't go out much, but yet you're not like a homebody. It's not like you're always home.
No. I don't think I could survive if I literally was just always in the house. But I will say though that this year has been atypical as far as big events go. Okay. I know you're probably referring to the conventions I've been to and things like that.
No, I'm talking about, the flea markets and the yard sale stuff. On your own YouTube channel, you do some videos of your finds, but I'm thinking that too, whereas that's not like shopping at Walmart or Target. You have to interact with people at a shopping center in an actual shop. There's the transaction, but you are talking to these people and potentially haggling. There's a massive social element to that part of it. It's not, I went to the store, I bought something, I didn't say 2 words to the clerk.
Right. No, that's true. There is a lot of And I mean, given that I teach, that's one of those things that is like, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to people when I tell them that I don't love big social events and I don't love going places. And then like, but you teach, don't you? Don't you stand in front of 24 students and like give speeches and lectures? I guess the question would be
okay. We'll start here. Is 24 students a large gathering?
Does that count as a large gathering in my mind? Or, I mean, that's a lot of people, I think.
I think I could be fine in a group of 25. I feel like once we start shifting the numbers towards 30 is when I would be like, all right, now I just want to sit in the corner with the 3 people I like best.
Oh, sure. I mean, are we talking? So we're talking in the sense of like a social gathering, not like you're performing.
Yeah,
something.
Not like you're performing. Although, I don't know that I'd want to perform.
No. I was going to say, because one of the another weird thing is that like I'm fine in a classroom with those students, but even if you take those same students and put them in an auditorium and put me on a stage and tell me I have to do a reading of my own work, that's going to shift things just enough that I'm probably going to be super nervous and probably not want to do it at all.
Is it okay? But is your classroom free flowing? Like there's a back and forth kind of like this?
Yes. Yeah.
So as opposed to the auditorium where it's like, okay, all eyes on Tony. Let's get the spotlight. Dim the lights. All eyes on Tony and go.
Right. And that notion of having like, I just assume if you're in an auditorium like that, you're probably giving a speech, and that's not okay for me. I don't want to give like a pre-written speech, because then I worry about, am I going to flub something?
Would you be better off the cuff?
I'm much better off the cuff. Yeah. I in fact, like the 2 conventions I did earlier this year, I signed up for readings at both of them, which is new for me. I mean, I've been trying to push myself this year. That's what I was kind of getting at earlier, is that like, if you're referring to the convention that I've been going to, I've been pushing myself more than any other year. Last year, I only did 1 convention and like 1 small Barnes and Noble signing.
Okay. This
year I did 2 larger conventions, and maybe I'm going to another convention, but I'm not like working it. But those readings had pretty small audiences, and the preparation for that in my head.
Yep.
Well, I was freaking the hell out. I mean, I kind of knew like if I get a dozen people, I'm lucky. But I'm thinking like now, okay, I have to practice a story and I have to read it a bunch of times and get good with it and really like prepare.
But okay, wouldn't it be? You're not in your head at all when you have to get up in front of the class?
I've been doing this for like 13.
Is it genuinely a comfort level thing? Like, okay, so you've been teaching for long enough that you're not in your head. So if I were to be like, all right, Tony, like next year, 5 conventions and like 7 or maybe even like monthly readings. Let's get some local ones in. And you just, your reps are more often. Do you think you could make it as easy as teaching? Or make it feel like teaching, where it's like you're not in your head. You just have to get the reps in.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. What is that called? That's desensitizing something or other.
I don't know. I always thought it was like getting in your 10,000 hours or whatever. Like that. It's the same. It's kind of the same thing where it's like the more you do it, the less of a problem it is. And that my own personal like social anxieties are the same thing, right? Mm-hmm. Like if I'm in a new place, I'm a bag of cats.
Yeah.
But if I'm there the second time or the third time, if there's people I've been with before as opposed to strangers, like it comes down from chaos to I don't want to say normal, but like, I can handle it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's that, it's one of those things. I'm trying to think of like, there's a name for it in therapy where you just like, you do the thing and you do it more often. And the more you do it, the more comfortable you get. And I'm like, that's one of my things is like, I don't like change. So if it's a brand new place, I've never been there, I've never driven there, I've never met the people, then sure, I'm going to be a lot more nervous and anxious than I would if it were like my second time at this convention and I'm meeting a bunch of people I know and, I've been doing readings. So yeah, that's kind of why I was trying to do more of this stuff, is because I'd like to, I do take my writing seriously, and I've become more and more aware of the fact that to be a serious writer, you have to go to these conventions. You have to do the readings,
Is it, I guess it feels like one of those things no one ever expects. Like, I want to be a writer. Great. How are your speaking skills? It's like, no, you misunderstood. I'm going to be a writer. And it's like, no, you have to speak to people. You have to meet people. You have to sell yourself. It's like, no, I'm not the marketing person. I'm just the writer. It's like,
oh, you're the marketing person now, buddy.
Yeah, right? Like, there's all these other hats you have to wear. And it's not, in my experience of talking to people and observing, it's not even like just independent. It's like, no. At every level, if you want to be a writer of any kind at any point, all right, time for you to market yourself and get out there. And doing the podcasts help, but you also have to press the flesh and do the Barnes and Noble things, and it's a lot.
It is a lot, and I resisted it for a very long time. It's really like my writer friends who over the past years have been like, listen, man, you have to start coming out to these, because I thought like, oh, it's good enough. I'll do my YouTube channel and I'll post on Twitter. And God knows that stuff barely reaches anyone. And you really have to network, and you really have to get out. Like when Tommy and the Order of Cosmic Champions came out, I just didn't really think about how I was going to market that personally. Like I knew my partner Tony had things lined up, and we had podcasts lined up, and we had like, the normal sort of online sort of stuff. But it really wasn't until a couple years after that came out that I was watching other writers doing like reading tours.
Okay.
I was like, oh, I could have done a reading tour. Like I just didn't think that was something I could do.
I didn't think so. You're years removed from that and that experience. Do you now look at the finished book as half of the journey? Is that, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but like having seen it and watched it and heard people talk about it, it feels like finishing the book and getting it in your hand is half the journey.
Yeah, you wouldn't think it. I mean, writing the book, writers think, or at least young writers, new writers think that writing the book is the entirety of the journey. And that's not even counting the editing and the rewrites and the submissions and looking for a publisher, looking for an agent. And you're probably, once you've typed, not that you're actually going to type the end at the end of your novel, but once you've typed the end, you probably are, if you're lucky, a couple years away from that thing, reaching an audience, if you're lucky.
Yeah, it's kind of the, and I think a lot of people that start somewhere else get kind of either disenfranchised or kind of, I don't know, they need someone to like pick up their sales. Cause like I put out a podcast, and if I get one response, whether it's a text message or a tweet or a thread or whatever social network or an email, it's like, oh, I hit somebody.
Yeah.
And, and because of the nature of it being digital, I can go like, oh, I had so many downloads. Okay, I've hit people. And my blog's no different. If somebody reads my blog, I get a ping. I mean, not physically, but like it counts somewhere, and I can go look at the analytics. With books, even if you sell the thing, no guarantee people read it.
Yeah. And if they read it, there's no guarantee they're going to review it. And if they review it, there's no guarantee that it's going to say what you want it to say.
Yeah. I mean, I will shamelessly say I've never asked for reviews for this show, but I also think that like, unlike a book, which especially when we're talking about agents and publishers, is very much not just about the author anymore.
Yeah.
But this podcast is very much just about me. If I'm having a good time and somebody enjoys listening to it, that's the win. But there is so much else in publishing, and I'm glad we're on publishing because I want to ask you this.
Yes.
As we record this, Summer is starting to dwindle into fall. Not officially, but the temperatures come down a little bit of late in our neck of the woods.
Yeah.
And you're getting ready to go back to school.
Very soon.
But all throughout the summer and even parts of last spring, as we've been in touch and in contact, you've been working as a teacher continuously, and you had some summer stuff, and you've been writing scripts for Retro Days.
Yep.
And working on your novel.
Yeah, and I still feel like a lazy bum.
We're not going to untackle. That's for, like, if you want to come lay on my couch, we can talk about that. That's a different thing. But what I want to know is, because I've talked to a lot of people, and look, all of those things are creative pursuits. I will put teaching as a creative pursuit because I don't think it's anything other than that if you're going to be good at it.
Sure.
But you do all these creative things for the day job to pay the bills.
Mm-hmm.
And then you come home or close the laptop from one thing and put on your writing hat. How do you stay motivated when I wrote, however long a script is, or however long 2 scripts is, or however long your lesson plan is, or how do you stay? I know you're hard on yourself, but the fact that you still get to it, how do you do that? Because it has to be draining. I just finished writing.
Yeah. Oh, well, I mean, the dirty secret is I don't always stay motivated, and I've been partly with your help, not that you've been helping with, just from listening to your podcast. I've gotten better at being okay with that.
Okay.
Like if I taught a class and then graded a bunch of essays and then wrote, 1,000 words toward a script and it's like 5:00 in the evening, I'm nicer to myself if I decide to call it a day and maybe relax for an hour and then make dinner and kind of enjoy the evening. So I'm not quite as, I'm not super barbaric against myself telling me I have to also get another 1,000 words into the novel. Has that slowed progress? Sure. But I kind of set some goals in my mind. I was telling myself that I would prefer to, finish this novel by the end of summer. That's looking less likely, but it's moving. I'm getting close.
Do you feel? I guess so. There's 2 massive questions, right? You can answer both or either. Do you feel better about yourself, knowing that you're treating yourself better, and is the writing, when you do get to it, better because you're not being mean to yourself, right? You get a lot more. What's the saying? You catch more flies with honey than shit, right? But when you're nicer to yourself, you have to be in a better headspace for creation.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things. I don't even know if I'm answering either of these questions now, but I've learned, and this is something I try to teach my students as well, as they're new writers and they're still kind of trying to figure out their own routines and who they are as creators and who they are as learners. You have to understand who you are as a creator, as a writer, as a learner, whatever, and understand that pushing yourself to be something you're not isn't necessarily going to create better output. So, to answer at least one of your questions, I think, by sitting back and allowing myself some time to think. I think you saw my post earlier, actually, on Twitter. I got out of the shower and I ran to Twitter and I said,
"You got your ending from the shower."
Yeah. Yeah, and that was because I took a break. I was like, you know what? I'd like to just take a break in the sometimes I like to take a midday shower,
Sure.
It kind of cool off and just refresh myself. And I'm in there. And one of the great things of that, and this is another thing we've talked about, is detaching from technology and social media and all that stuff. You can't post on social media when you're in the shower. Well, I guess some people can, but I certainly can't.
Yeah, no.
And it gives you that moment of quiet reflection. And I was thinking about my novel, even though that's not what I was working on today. I was working on my fall lesson plans and prepping all that crap. And maybe that's why my mind naturally went to the novel, because my mind needed the break. But it kind of floated there, and I was thinking about it, and I realized what the ending's going to be, which is huge for me because I'm 83,000 words into probably a 90,000 word novel, and I didn't know how it was going to end.
I still think it's amazing because I feel like you let, like, from afar, especially as someone who's only really dabbled in the last 20 years with like short story fiction. I've always been a let the story tell itself.
Yeah.
Look, I know there's planners and there's plotters, but if you're going to let the story write itself, even if it's a short story, you could be writing for a while.
Yeah. It's a scary thing. It can become when you're at the point where I was, and you don't know how the thing's going to end that you've been working on for 2 years, it becomes, and that's part of the reason why it can sometimes take longer than you think, because you start to stall out, and you start to question yourself, and you start to wonder, was I faking it all this time? But I mean, I've been doing this long enough to know that I'll get there.
Oh yeah. There's a definite, like, and I feel like it in sports, it's probably like the easy metaphor. It's like, oh, well, on the basketball court, well, he missed 7 shots in a row. Or like in baseball, like, oh, he hasn't gotten a hit in 5 games. But like, if you've been at it long enough, yeah, for every, streak of good things, there's a streak of bad things. And they don't go back and forth. And most of the averaging out there's a reason we average things out. You've been there, you'll get through it. But
yeah, I
feel like younger you would probably not only have not been kind to yourself, you would have been like burning the midnight oil till like 3 a.m. going like just pacing around. Like, what's the end? Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? And then now it's just counterproductive, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But I still think, space is good, but I still don't know where you get it from though. The idea that you're doing all these creative pursuits all day.
Right. Oh, going back to like the original question of like, where do I get the motivation?
Yeah.
And I think you probably can relate to this, at least on some level. The need to create is strong in me.
Okay.
And it almost doesn't matter if no one ever sees the stuff. It almost doesn't matter if, I'm never what, objectively someone would call a successful writer, or creator in any of my, pursuits. But I don't feel sane. I don't feel okay without producing something, anything.
Yeah, but you're producing something all along during the day. Like, you are not, the prototypical, like, I was in retail all day and I come home and I get to create something. You're putting out a script that in 2 weeks will be on YouTube, having been recorded by other like-minded professionals and edited by like-minded professionals. And so it's not like you are toiling away all day with no creative. So I guess that's where it is. It's your personal novel that you're working on right now is what I would consider creative overdrive, because you're already doing something creative.
I guess I don't. I mean, and I think you're being generous. Well, no.
I mean, I consider this podcast creative. So and that's just us talking and me editing. Like, I mean, talk about a loose definition of creative. Yeah, of course.
So, I think what it comes down to is, as much as I enjoy writing those scripts for Retro Days, and I do, I love that channel to death. I want to see it succeed. I want to see it become like a huge thing. But at the end of the day, I'm not getting what I need out of it.
Okay.
And
it's not scratching the exact itch.
Right. And I'm struggling to define what that means exactly. But I guess probably having something to do with my personal interest in horror and Halloween and the spooky stuff and whatever. It's not mine, you know,
Okay.
like, sure, I'm writing the scripts, but it's not really my channel.
It's a collaborative effort.
Yeah. And it's very much like nonfiction. I'm doing research for it. I can get creative in there, and I certainly do. Some of our newer episodes have been like these sort of narrative experiences where, you know, the characters of retro days go in a time machine into the past, and there's dialogue and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I get to interject here real quick. And if you haven't checked out Retro Days, you should if you're listening to this. But also, when they do the time travel episodes, it's wonderful. However, the host picks on you. Are you writing jokes to pick on yourself?
That's me. Yeah. That, you know what? It's funny that you mentioned that, because the one day my dad calls me up and he says, you know, it was a really great episode, but I don't like that John was making fun of you. And I was like, Dad, nothing comes out of his mouth that I didn't put there. I'm the script writer. So like, I make it sound like it's him picking on me, but yeah, it's me making fun of myself.
Okay. All right. You should definitely spread it around. That's, you know,
yeah, you know, it's
easier to be self-depreciated. Like, I know that.
Right. No, but I'm aware that people who watch the channel, despite there being a credits, despite it kind of being mentioned throughout the, the channel, I'm aware people watch that and just assume that that's just John talking, and it's like totally, you know, his perspective and his comments and whatnot. But yeah, he jokingly calls himself the talking monkey in the Discord, and I'm the writer, the monkey, the writing monkey.
I mean, the man with the strings. I mean, you know, that's fair. So one of the other things that I have, and look, this past spring, I got into baking. And it's not related to you, because I only usually bake bread. But okay. I do know, and anybody who follows you on any social network at all, you are a baker.
Yeah. I enjoy baking.
You enjoy baking, which makes you a baker. That's my definition. You know, where does it come from? I mean, for me, it was just like I wanted to try it. I had family members who were doing it or who had done it. And I was like, I want to do this. And then I started baking bread, and I was like, I really like this.
Yeah.
And that's and then it got hot, and I went, I don't want to do this until it gets cold again.
Oh, I do not bake. No, I don't have air conditioning in the main part of, like, at least in the kitchen. So I will not turn that oven on if it's super hot.
Yeah.
So yeah, the baking does kind of fall off a little bit. Like my pizza nights fall off a little bit because of that. But to answer your question, where it comes from, it's a natural extension of my interest in cooking, which started when I moved to Pennsylvania from Brooklyn, and realized that 90%, at least at the time in the early 90s, 90% of the Italian pastries, the bread, the food, all the Italian stuff that I enjoyed in Brooklyn, you just couldn't get it here. You couldn't find it. There was no going out to the bakery and picking up a cannoli. You know, you weren't going to go get your St. Joseph's Day pastries or anything like that. So I, kind of early on, and certainly my mom was cooking and she was making all the family recipes and everything. But essentially, as soon as I was in a position to want to and be able to cook for myself, I was cooking and learning all the family recipes, making the Sunday gravy, making, the meatballs and everything. And over time, like I said, just it's a natural extension over time, because I enjoy cooking and I like good food. I got interested in different baked goods, and then I just had a natural interest in food science as well. So fermentation.
So I have to interject. At any point along this journey, did you become and I'll admit it, for about 2 years, I was a Food Network addict. It passed. I'll admit it passed, but there was a good 2 years when I think some point after I moved out, I was on my own. And that was around the time of Good Eats, which Alton Brown was mainly food science.
Yeah, he was great.
And I think that kind of helped a little bit. But like, did you go through a Food Network phase?
I sure did. When I had cable, I was watching Food Network all the time. And even now, I'll still watch food like YouTube. I'll watch Chef John. There was a point where I was really addicted to the Bon Appetit channel because they were doing this interesting sort of cross-promotional thing where like all of the personalities would interact in the test kitchen.
Okay.
So like if you watched Brad Leone doing his show, then you would see Claire and they would like cross paths in the kitchen. So it was almost like reality television crossed with food.
Okay.
Then they went through a whole thing. Not that I'm not going to get into all that because it's not that interesting, but I stopped watching that. But yeah, I still watch like YouTube stuff.
But you experiment on a level that I do not. My experiment is I'm going to try a new bread.
Okay.
And if it goes well, I will mess around with it the second time.
Sure.
I've look, your Instagram / your social networks when you're baking are not good for anyone's waistline. But I've read some of your comments that you make.
Okay.
I think you are as hard on your baking and cooking skills as you are on your writing skills.
I have a lot of trouble being proud of myself, I guess. I'm not very prideful. I don't
think
man.
It's pride, man. I genuinely believe, having gotten to know you and also having been like you, we spend so much time in our daily lives with the things that are passions for us, that consume us and drive us, that always inevitably end with the following phrase, what's next?
Sure.
And so whether you're like me and don't really celebrate anything, or you're like other people and you do, the celebration only, even the people I know that celebrate within the creative space, the party ends and somebody goes, well, what's next? And and I don't know, none of us are in rat races, right? Like nobody's going to be upset if I skip a blog post. There might be a few listeners that get upset if I skipped a podcast episode.
Yeah.
But no, there's no outside pressure. But internally, we are so wired to what's next, the next script, the next chapter, the next episode, the next blog post, that it feels like as creatives, we are hard on ourselves because the next time, we know there's going to be a next time. The next time it will be better. And so the post-mortem on any project, even the good ones, is, well, how can I make this better? So clearly it wasn't good enough.
No, it's never good enough. It never, that's another one of those things that I try to work through. I know it's not healthy to be that way necessarily, but I talk to people about this stuff. It is in my nature to get, 50 5- and 4-star reviews on a novel and then get one 1-star review and believe the 1-star review and distrust all of the higher reviews. I don't know why that is.
No, I mean, it's
like finally someone that guy knows he figured it out. He knows that I'm secretly not really.
But after all this time, do you still have imposter syndrome?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
You have, like, on your shelf, like your author shelf, there's more than one published work.
All flukes. I know it's
even like take a look at Retro Days. Like, you guys celebrated a milestone recently.
Yeah.
Is that still like,
what was it? 50 episodes, right?
Yeah. So but I mean, by the time people are listening to this, you'll have blown by that. But again, because there's always a what's next. But like that's not 50 Flukes, is it? Or is that one slightly different because it's a collaboration?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many people working on that stuff. So it doesn't end with my, how a novel, okay. Not that a novel ends with me. I mean, obviously there are editors and, publishers and the cover design, and there's a lot of other hands in that as well. I think everything's kind of collaborative, really, to a certain degree. And we're not alone in almost, I can't think of, maybe my sculptures, I guess, is the only thing that no one else touches.
In theory, your sculptures are collaborative. And I'm going to interject myself because you've admitted that occasionally you listen to the show when you're, spinning pots.
Yeah.
And that means that you're not alone. And I'm not saying okay. I'm like, oh, you should, press in there and expand here. But like, there are other ideas from the ether. You're not legitimately in a silo by yourself in silence.
Oh, sure.
Doing it. And so there are always other things kind of pressing on us that as artists we use
absolutely.
For other things.
And I like that. I like that notion of like the ongoing conversation of humanity in a way. Like everything affects everything else, Nothing exists in a vacuum. Whether you know it or not, you're being influenced by something. And I do like that idea. I like that notion because it sort of it's the connectivity between you and all these people you maybe never will meet, people who may not be alive anymore. And we are all still having this ongoing conversation together and building off of each other's work. Sometimes in a very direct way, sometimes in very indirect ways.
I guess the question I have is, as you're saying that, and I agree with everything you're saying, but the anxiety level gets a little bit ratcheted up because now I'm not alone anymore. It's like, oh, crap. I'm standing on the shoulders of all the other people now.
Yeah.
The anxiety level goes up a little bit.
I don't know that I'm thinking about that as I'm working usually.
That's fair.
It's very much a
do you get in a state like I'm not going to say you go zen, but like do you get in a state where it's like regardless of what you're doing, but that it's like, all right, I'm in it, I'm feeling it, let's go. Let's bake, let's write, let's sculpt, whatever it is.
Those are the best moments. Those are the moments that I think all creatives strive for. I'd be lying if I said I was always in that moment.
Oh,
there are plenty of times where I am just digging every single word out of myself as if I were, carving my liver out. And, it's a struggle. And, if I get 50 words out of the session, I'm lucky. And you feel worse somehow, like you've expended more energy doing writing those 50 words than the day that you wrote 2,000 words in the zone.
But so you said you're 83,000 words in now.
Yeah.
Looking back, because obviously there have been many days, and some of those days have been 20,000 words or 2,000 words in 20 minutes, and some of those have been 50 words in 5 hours. But they all add up to that 83. Like, obviously when you're in it, it's a very different thing. But looking back on where you're at, even though I know you still have as you said earlier, you have an ending to write. Do you look back and go like, as a whole though, or do you look back and go, oh, I remember those 50 words?
When I'm editing, I remember those 50 words.
Okay.
Because you can tell there's a very distinct, lack of coherence sometimes when you're editing and you hit one of those stretches where you could tell you're just trying to advance the plot to get to the next part of it so that you can just get to a point where you're in it again.
Okay.
So yeah, when I'm editing, I see those moments and I don't remember them. I can't say like, oh, that was January the 2nd, but
but you can see it on the page.
Yeah. I assume that was a moment I was struggling to get to the next point.
All right. I mean, but is it only there? Like, I mean, does that kind of bleed into the sculpting too?
The sculpting is a very different animal for me. I think mostly it's the preparation for sculpting where I don't want to say struggling, but where I'm like really, there's a lot more going into that. Like I usually, what I do is I usually sketch out an idea first.
Okay.
And I'm not great. I mean, I used to love drawing when I was a kid, but I'm not great at it. So it's really mostly for my own reference for the sculpting. And during that, the conceiving of an idea, what am I going to sculpt? That part can be a little bit like the 50-word thing we were just talking about. But once I'm sculpting, it's wow, man. I love the feeling of, because I let go.
Okay.
I'm playing either a podcast, like you said, or I'm playing music, and my mind is elsewhere.
Okay.
Like it's not like when I write, where my mind has to be on the plot and the characters and the continuity and blah blah blah. When I'm sculpting, my mind is in the ether, and in fact, sculpting sometimes helps me with the writing because I can
disconnect.
Yeah.
How about cooking, baking? Is that more in the sculpting vein where you get to just be in it and check out? I mean, not check out. You still need to know your numbers and your measurements and your temperatures. I get all that, but like, is that God, it sounds horrible for me to say, but was that a thoughtless thing for you where you can kind of remove yourself, or is it only the sculpting?
That's only the sculpting. Or if I were still painting and drawing and that kind of stuff, any of those kinds of like the visual arts,
okay.
That's where my mind can go be free and dance in the fields and whatnot. But no, cooking is a sport. Cooking and baking is a sport for me. There's something, it's like you want the best stats. Okay. So I'm like, how can I get this roast chicken, these baked potatoes, and the green beans almondine? How can I get all of that on the table at the same time and hot?
See, you are a man after my own, I guess, stomach, because I am very much, I don't like it's. I think Thanksgiving may be one of my favorite cooking sports.
Yeah.
Because it very much is. It's that, but there's always like more than 3 dishes.
Yeah.
And it's like, none of us have professional kitchens.
Yeah.
We only have so many burners. Most of us only have, I have a toaster oven on my countertop and an oven. So what can go where? How do I time it out so everything's good? And then the one killer to all of it, which makes or breaks everything, is, have you done the math on your turkey right?
Yep.
And so
those turkeys, they can be a real pain in the butt.
They can. I like that you. Yeah, I think cooking is definitely a sport. And
I will cop to this. My brother usually is the one doing Thanksgiving. So I can't take credit for attempting that usually.
Look, I usually don't do Thanksgiving either, but I do Friendsgiving every year because I want the opportunity to cook all that stuff, and I require leftovers.
Absolutely.
It's one of the things that if you've never not hosted that kind of a meal, you don't know what you're missing as far as leftovers go. But
leftovers are better than the initial meal, in my opinion.
Well, it's such a letdown. I spent 12 hours cooking this, or 8 hours or 10 hours cooking this. We sat down. We ate it all in 35 minutes. We hung around the table for an extra 45, and now it's cleanup time. And it's definitely not. It's, you know what it is? Thanksgiving is more like the 50 words than it is the 2000.
Right.
I put all this effort in, and that's all I get out of it, which is why the leftovers make it better, because it lasts. It gets it closer to the 2000. It lasts longer.
Yeah, you get extra creative with the leftover. I mean, at least I do. I don't just warm up the leftovers. I'm often doing weird things with it to make. No, that's not true. The first leftover meal, I'll do just leftovers.
Okay.
After that, I'm making pot pie. I'm making like Thanksgiving Day sandwiches.
I think it all depends on what you run out of first as well. That's like, it's just like, all right, well, I mean, I can run back the meal once or twice if I have everything. But at a certain point, you're like, but all I have left is turkey.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, now we got to get creative. And that's when, for me, I'm lazy. It's just, all right, time to make turkey chili.
That sounds good, too, though. I like I'll eat turkey chili any day. But, the other thing, too, though, is the reason it feels like the 50 words sometimes, especially if you're the one cooking.
Yeah.
At least I feel this way, and it doesn't necessarily have to be Thanksgiving. It's like when you're cooking, by the time I sit down, I'm so jacked up. Like I've been rushing around the kitchen and you're trying to time everything. I can't kind of like calm myself down and enjoy the meal. I'm eating the meal the way I was cooking it, which is fast.
Yeah.
And
I find that to be way too accurate, even when it's a small meal.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm rushing to cook, I am rushing to eat. I think going out to eat, which I don't do all that often, might be the one time, or maybe when I'm a guest, I try and relax. But when I'm hosting, I tend not to enjoy it. I should probably we started off with you expanding yourself and trying to get better at things. I should get better at enjoying my own food.
Yeah. And I'll catch myself halfway through a meal sometimes and be like, and I'll try to like physically slow myself down and I'll stop and I'll like smell the food, look at the food. And it's crazy too, because sometimes I think the best times is when if I'm just cooking for myself and I'm taking my time.
Yep.
Like I like making the plate look nice. Okay. I like having that sort of, that aspect of enjoyment of the food, not just the eating of it, but the way it looks, the way it smells. And I think sometimes, and I'm not necessarily taking pictures of it. I know some people, if you're doing that, you got to take a picture, you got to put it on Instagram. It's for me. I want to see a pretty plate of food.
And look, one of my specialties in the last maybe decade has been chili, but like I'm horrible with chili in that I never make the same one twice. So like if you want to come over for chili, that's great. But if you like it, you'll never eat it again because I don't measure anything. And I'm always like, all right, what's going in it this time? And for better or worse, that also means that if I was going to take a photo, they'd all look relatively the same, despite the fact that they taste way different.
Yeah, yeah. Well, once you have a familiarity with a recipe and once you've made a certain thing a number of times, like I'm the same way with a lot of different foods. I don't use recipes for a ton of stuff I make because I know how to make it.
Yep.
And because I know how to make it, there is that, and maybe that goes back to us being creatives and just wanting to see like, ooh, what's going to happen now? Like, ooh, I read that cinnamon and cocoa powder and chili is pretty good, so I'm going to give this a try.
Well, I mean, at some point, I guess what we've learned from all this is that we need to get together and you're coming down for a chili at some point.
Absolutely. I will devour chili any day. Do you make it spicy?
Depends. If of one of the things is Steph doesn't love really spicy, so I can give it a spice like palate, but I can't make it hot. Otherwise, because I make a lot of it, because there's no point in making a little chili. Right. Otherwise, I'm eating chili for like a week. Yeah. I need to make it so that she likes it enough to eat some leftovers, so I'm not eating it for lunch and dinner for the next 10 days.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Or you come over, I'll send you home with some.
You got to have, first day is chili, second day is chili dogs, third day is chili nachos.
Yeah.
I have trouble not eating, I have trouble not turning leftovers into something new. I love having leftover white rice because, man.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's true. It's a blank canvas.
Yeah.
When I go back into my own history for just exactly why I started this podcast, I can't rightly remember. But what I can tell you is that I didn't do it to make friends, but that has been a welcome and fairly unexpected surprise. Tony and I get along so well because as creatives, even in vastly different but sometimes overlapping mediums, we both have similar flaws, and it's much easier to push the Sisyphusian boulder up the proverbial creative hill when you have help. As you heard Tony say, the need to create is strong in me, and he also said, I have a lot of trouble being proud of myself. And well, if I've never explicitly said those things on this podcast or in real life, they apply to me too. Perhaps that's not where the friendship started, but it's certainly enough to sustain it. And it doesn't hurt that outside of the writing and creative spaces, we can swap some kitchen stories as well. There's always more than meets the eye to most creatives, especially writers. You just have to take the time to find out exactly what they transform into when they put down the pen. Thanks for listening to the Palmer Files episode 135. And now for the official business. The Palmer Files releases every 2 weeks on Tuesdays. If you're still listening, I encourage you to join the discussion. You can find all related ways to contact my guest, Tony, and myself in the show notes. There, you can also find Tony's website, anthonyjrapino.com. That's ANTHONYJRAPINO.com. Plus, you can watch all of Tony's Retro Days scripts come to life on youtube.com/retrodays. Again, that's RETRODAZE. The music for this episode was provided by Henno Heitur. Email can be sent to this show at thepalmerfiles@gmail.com. And remember, your home for all things Agent Palmer is agentpalmer.com. All right, Tony, do you have one final question for me?
Oh, it's a doozy. It's a three-parter. Okay. I don't know. You may only decide to answer one part of this, and I'm trolling you a little bit with the first question kind of, too.
That's fine. Let's go. All right.
So I know you've talked about this on your podcast, and it's almost like a joke that people will always be asking you, when are you going to write your novel?
That's true.
So I'm not going to ask you that. What I want to know is what the likelihood is that you'll ever actually write a novel. And then the second part of that is, if you were going to write a novel, I don't suspect you'd know what it's about, but do you know like what genre it would be in? And the third part is, assuming the answer to any of that is no, what then is your next creative outlet? That thing that you have been wanting to mess around with that you haven't yet explored, some other creative just pursuit.
All right, so the first question is still probably not, just because I think I need a eureka moment to really get kickstarted for a novel of any or a book of any kind.
Sure.
Look, I think there's a part of me that I am an editor on a published book on my shelf. I will probably be an editor on another published book on my shelf, or two or three, until Zapata fires me. But I think we get along well. Not just because we're best friends, but I think our collaboration as editor and writer has been very good over the last decades. So as long as he keeps pumping out things, even if it's every 20 years, I get a little bit of the victory of like, hey, this is in my hand. I helped make this. Yeah. Which is, there's a tangible nature that I'm not going to ever start releasing the podcast on CD. Like I just don't see it happening. So I think that's my tangible thing. However, if I did get that one idea, whatever it is that jumpstarts, hey, I have a book idea. I'm not opposed to it. I'm just not searching for it. Right. Second, I feel like if I was going to handicap it a little bit, there's probably a 75% chance it's nonfiction. Okay. I don't know what it's about, but I feel like I'm probably more inclined to do the research and tell a factual thing than to just write a fiction novel. Okay. But if I did write a fiction novel, it would kind of be like I think it would be some kind of, parody's too strong a word, but it would be maybe my life through the looking glass, so to speak, where it's not me, but it's me.
Okay. See, okay. So I was wrong in my one of the reasons I was asking the genre is because I had a bet with myself.
Yep.
I did think that you might say nonfiction just based on the blog.
Yep.
And, but my other, I thought slightly stronger feeling, I was thinking that you were going to say something like either science fiction or like the espionage kind of.
I feel, you know what? It's funny. I really love reading the espionage. I don't know that I could make it up. You know what I mean? Like, it's one of those, like, you know, I really like playing baseball. Those days are behind me. Or watching baseball. Playing it's probably behind me, right? Like, I think there's a level to it. And I think, you know, I just know how to borrow and steal at this point as a writer. So I feel like it would be better if I was borrowing and stealing from myself than like James Bond. Like, let's not steal, or Archer, right? Like, probably one of the more concurrent pieces of spy fiction that's not written down that I've consumed. But yeah, I've already nobody's seen it yet, but I've already dabbled in video, so I feel like that's not an answer for you as far as like some other medium.
Right, because you've already kind of started there.
Yeah, I mean, I've shot some stuff, and I do editing, and for my day gig, I create videos, and so I'm familiar with the editing process and the timeline process. And while it's similar to editing audio, it's still vastly different. But I have that skill set, and I've played in that sandbox. As far as something new, I mean, so while there is very much that, hey, you're a blogger, when are you going to write a book? There is very much a new thing that I was not prepared for, which was, hey, you're a podcaster, when are you going to do it live?
Okay. Yeah, I could see that. There, a lot of podcasters are doing like their live performances.
Live tapings, live tours, or exclusive tours where they're not recording. And if you're not, but I don't know, I've talked about this before. I feel like I'm less inclined to do, I think you could convince me to do a panel, but to take this show live, you and I are a great example. You and I have a connection off mic, so to speak.
Right.
I still think that no matter how comfortable you and I are in front of the audience, the episode we just recorded is vastly different in front of an audience.
Okay.
Because there's not a human alive who can go back to like the very beginning of this episode and have any reaction from the audience not change something. Like, you know what I mean? Like I'm bad at specifics, but like, let's go with how we ended the episode talking about food. Any number of those food items could have elicited an ooh, an ah, a boo, or a cheering from the audience, and it literally changes the rest of the discussion, because now we're reacting to an audience that we know exists when we're talking here, but but they're not part of this conversation.
Right. I mean, that's assuming that we are in open to an interactive audience experience in that way. I know some podcasts will do like a more scripted sort of performance for the live shows. But something like this, yeah, I would imagine that, especially if it actually were the two of us, I know that I have a very hard time, not because I'm a teacher, not reacting and playing off.
I mean, look, if I could host an evening with Tony, right? I think I could do that where it's like, I get to ask questions on behalf of the audience and then we can play with the audience. But that's not the podcast anymore. Do you know what I mean? Like, and so there are elements that are different things. They're just not quite it.
Okay.
But I will say it's not an answer as far as something new. But I was
gonna say maybe that I don't accept your answer.
Well, then I would say I might dabble in something again. You know, there is a part of me. All right, I'm going to put it out into the world, but I cannot guarantee anything. But I have been dabbling with music again.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing.
I thought that's where you might go with it because...
Yeah, it's not... there's a part of me that would love to say that I have the inspiration for an album, and that would be fun. I do love all the little toys. And I can record this podcast... And I know it's not the same, but I could probably record an album if I wanted to. I have 2 ideas musically for 2 different songs. That's a start.
Yeah.
But I haven't written lyrics in well over 2 decades. I haven't finished a song in well over 2 decades.
Okay.
So the fact that I even committed 2 licks / rhythms to record is a kind of a start in that direction. But I'm going to need a lot more in order to bring that to fruition. It's like it's not, the fire's not out.
Yeah.
But it's also not burning bright.
Have you sat down and tried to write lyrics or?
No, I haven't sat down and tried to write lyrics, but I have sat down and tried to finish the song. Like, I have these parts. How can I put it together? And I'm not going to say it wasn't fruitful, but I didn't actually finish it. So I don't even have like a song. I still have.
Right, but how did you
pieces.
feel while you were doing it?
Surprised that I was doing it.
Okay.
I mean, honestly, look. In the last few episodes, I've talked to musicians, and this was happening separate of those conversations. In fact, a lot of this happened before I even, was talking to those people. But in talking to them, especially the musicians that were away from music and came back to it, it kind of just amplifies the message of you can go back. You closed this door, and so I've opened it. I haven't walked through into the room, but the door is open, and I can, to flesh out the metaphor, the door is open, and I can hear music.
Nice. A lot. So with something like that, and it kind of, I feel like it connects to what we were talking about earlier a little bit in your questions of, how do I self-motivate and how do I feel about, moving from one project to another project? Yeah. If you're approaching this as something that you don't suspect will ever make money or necessarily be heard by a lot of people, then obviously the question is, are you enjoying it or are you getting something out of it? And if the answer to that is even a little bit yes, then you should pursue it.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the question is, and I don't like this term, but I can't come up with another term that's better for it. How much of a Renaissance man do I want to be? Right? Like, I'm already doing writing and talking. And, I dabble in video, right?
Yeah.
Music is not that much of a degree of separation from any of the things I just mentioned, but it's still a different beast. And so there is a part of it which is like, well, but is this enough? Like, is it enough to just noodle on my couch and know that what I've recorded is as far as it'll go? Probably, but it also means,
well,
it was unexpected when it started. So at moment, I'm not forcing it.
Okay.
There's a chance that if I have a free couple hours, I could force myself with it, because that's the other thing. We talk about like the forced 50 words, but sometimes we get 2,000 words out of, being a little bit forceful with ourselves. And so if we're going to be forceful with ourselves, there's nothing wrong with making an attempt to go a little bit harder.
Sure. Yeah. And like, I didn't mean to suggest that.
Yeah. Isn't this enough, Tony? Come on. I put out all the blogs. I put out all the podcasts. How much more can I do? Gosh.
Well, the question was predicated on the notion of like, do you want to?
I don't know. I'm not going to be any more creatively fulfilled than I am right now. However, okay. I was creatively surprised that the two riffs as they were, came along to begin with.
Nice. Yeah, I could see that. I mean, I don't know. It's one of those things that I find myself, because, even earlier asking about like how I'm, I forget the phrasing of the question, but like the fact that I'm doing all these different creative things all in the same day. And I still, even in spite of that, there are creative outlets that I still kind of want to mess with. Like I find myself gravitating to new hobbies and new, not necessarily for anything other than just like the pursuit of that, to have fun, to enjoy it myself. I'm constantly like, I'll see a video about something. I'm like, oh, I want to try that.
I mean, look, I will say this. There was a time when I seriously considered video essays, but it was only ever
makes sense.
It was only ever in theory though, because I never came up with an essay.
Right.
Just like that's the thing, right? Like I talk about an album potentially, and I have two parts to what could become songs.
Mm.
I thought about video essays, but I never had an essay in mind. So there was never something concrete to get going with at that point. And it's one of the weirdest things in the world. But when it comes to the podcast and the blog, I'm fairly open to like any suggestion. Oh, you might want to write about this. Oh, you should have that person on. But when I think about a video essay, no, that's got to come from my shower. Like that's got to come from that eureka moment when I'm completely unplugged. I wouldn't not listen to ideas, but I feel like it's got to be something that comes from inside first, at least for the first one.
Okay, so a couple of things on that.
Yeah.
First, I just want to say video essays makes almost too much sense. In the context of you writing a blog and hosting a podcast, video essays just make so much sense to me now that you say it out loud.
Okay.
And secondly, I guess I'm just wondering, well, what's the difference between a video essay and your blog posts and recording a blog post?
So the idea would be I wouldn't do the same thing, right? Like I've always tried to keep the mediums separate.
Okay.
So if I was going to, let's say, write an editorial, I wouldn't also put it on the blog. It would have to be something that would be better in video format. It would have to be something where, like, I don't know, if I was talking about something being hot, it would be much better for the consumer of that to see a volcano of B-roll than of me to try and describe it as hot in the written form, right? And I think it's I need that first idea to really figure it out and see it for myself. But I mean, it's not out of the realm. It's just the spark hasn't happened yet. But I know it's there. It's like I have a bike. I just don't ride it. But I know it's there and I can ride it. Fair enough.
That makes sense. That makes sense now that you say it. You want and crave a different area of exploration than what you explore on the blog.
Well,
for it to be on video.
It doesn't even have to be a different area. It's just, people were like, well, you could, when I was starting the podcast, people were like, well, you could just read your blogs. And I was like, no, you can read them for yourself. And I think the idea of video essays is I toyed with the idea of just like reading my own stuff, but it's like, but you could just do that. That's not different. I want to use the different mediums in a different way. I could easily have turned record on video for this podcast and put that up as a video. And I get to video edit as well. But this is an audio format, and the blog is the text format. And the video format, while it will probably definitely have a script, it needs something else, and I don't know what that is yet.
Right on.
So yeah, I mean, maybe it's video essays, maybe it's an album, maybe it's a single. I just don't know.
And the beauty is, it could be any of those things and all of those things, and they're all possible.
Yes. That's also scary, but yes.